Okay, well, that definitely gives us a majority. So let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Jared, could you run through the rules of engagement for our virtual meetings as well as take roll call?
Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Jared Allen, Administrative Technician, Lawrence Transit. Along with me here is Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. He will work alongside Mike Wazakowski to facilitate the meeting's proceedings. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and public access cable channel 25. During the meeting, when you are not participating, please mute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon found in the lower left-hand side of the Zoom menu. In some cases, we may mute or unmute people as needed to minimize distractions during the meeting. Please remember to state your name and title for the benefit of those listening remotely. If you are participating by phone, you can click *6 to unmute your phone. And now I will do roll call. Lance Fay.
Here.
Austin Stifler.
Present.
Mike Wazakowski.
Sorry, I muted here.
Foster Spicinger. Alan Ackland.
Here.
Gregory Critchlow. Bill Wilson. August Rudisell.
Looks like he's here, but connecting his audio right now.
Ready, get.
Here.
Okay, that definitely gives us a quorum. Thank you, everyone who is available to attend today. Really appreciate you giving your time and energy to this. Next item on the agenda is to review minutes from our meeting in June. As always, I will provide free opportunities for anyone to provide amendments to the minutes that were prepared for us by city staff. And if there are no further amendments offered after 3 calls, then the minutes will be deemed approved by unanimous consent. So I hope that everyone has had an opportunity to review the minutes. If not, I will give you time now as I go through 3 calls. First, does anyone on PTAC have any amendments to offer to the minutes from our June meeting? Second call, does anyone have any amendments to offer to the minutes from our June meeting? Last call, does anyone in PTAC online have any amendments to offer to the minutes from our June meeting? Okay, hearing none, the minutes are deemed approved by unanimous consent. So first item on our regular agenda, and only item on our regular agenda, is to review the draft writer suspension policy, following up from us tabling this conversation from our meeting in June, in order to provide city staff the opportunity to revise briefly what we had drafted going into that meeting. So Adam, I believe you have a presentation for us, or text document, something like that.
Yeah, happy to bring that up and walk through it. I will say we may have went over general public comment. I'll just share that we didn't get anything written. Don't have anyone here in the room, so just a heads up on that item.
Apologies, I did skip that. I did not see anyone on the line who is a member of the public. A little out of practice right now, a little tired at this point.
I think that's deserved. That's all right. Okay, let me get this brought up. Okay, so thanks everybody for feedback last month on this rider suspension policy, and apologies for the way we have to attach this. I wanted to give you all a redlined version so that you could see what was changed, which works pretty well when we're changing text. When I add a comment, it unfortunately puts that comment at the bottom of the document. So I'll try to point out the couple instances that happens. But we did our best to respond to what we heard. So as I scroll through this, one of the first items that we brought in here was a concern that we didn't have language in here about staff training and how staff will be trained on this policy. So we kept that section pretty simple, but just clarified that the contracted service provider and anybody at the city will undergo training for this policy and upon hiring, but also annually, so that they're up to date if there's any changes or just refreshed. That's pretty typical of some of our policies, and we generally run those through the safety meetings that our service provider has on a monthly basis. We'll have some policy updates or reminders then. So that is one of the areas we added. There was some discussion about law enforcement involvement. Would they be present when we're issuing warnings or suspensions? So I'm not sure as we re-listened that there was a direct ask for that, but that conversation did bring up, the thought that we maybe wanted to be more clear on how law enforcement will be engaged. So we added to the notification and communication section that the presence of law enforcement when we're actually delivering written suspensions is optional, essentially at my discretion. I do think in some cases after operational staff and myself would review any incident where we think it merits someone being the recipient of a warning or a suspension. In some cases, I can imagine us talking through, maybe in this case, we do want law enforcement with us. I would imagine in most cases, we probably wouldn't start with that. It'd probably be kind of an exception type case, but wanted to add that clarifying language in there. In the appeal process section, there was a question about would someone be allowed to continue riding the bus when they are appealing a suspension. So clarified that section in that riders would be allowed to continue to ride the bus when they receive a warning. So the two-step process that we have. Some feedback. The two-step process we have when someone gets a warning, we think will allow them to continue to ride the bus, and unless that behavior or unacceptable behavior would continue. And then if someone is receiving a suspension, they wouldn't be allowed to ride the bus on that appeal. So that was the direction we tried to handle that. Happy to. That was the direction we tried to handle that. Happy to.
Adam, this is Austin. The address, the only way to file.
August, you're breaking up there. You might try again, or might have to throw it in the chat.
I was just saying, is the email address the only way to? Yeah, is the email address the appeal?
Sorry, still didn't catch it.
I think the question was, how do you appeal it? And that's the third bullet there, that you can appeal it in person, or at least file to appeal in person, but you need to do it at the transit office. Raised a question for me, would we amend this later as a friendly amendment to include the central station when that's open, if there's going to be a permanent staffer there?
Yeah, that's a good point. And we would, all of our admin staff will be moving there anyways, so that address will need to be amended. Yeah.
Friendly amendment then.
Yeah. But and maybe this was kind of the leading question there, but our internal discussion was about trying to make appeals accessible. So I think we started out with language that just said that appeals must be written. We did have some discussion about, maybe not everybody is fluent in writing or different language and things like that. So we wanted the ability to appeal to be written, but if someone couldn't do that, they could do it in person verbally. They would just, we have to be in the same space. So we ask people to come to us in that scenario.
I guess for me, that raised a question, what if the way that someone would get to the office to tell you in person that they want to appeal is by taking the bus that they're suspended from? But that seems like we're getting into an edge case there a little bit.
Yeah, and we may, as I mentioned in one of the comments through here, that we'll have some learning curve if we face some certain logistics we don't expect. I think we'll do our best effort to meet people where they're at and adjust as needed. All right. Relatively simple but important change in section 7. Alan had pointed out the shall language for alternative transportation. So we've adjusted that to just say should. So, we're not necessarily completely in charge or have to get someone alternative transportation, but we'll certainly make a good effort to try to help in that regard. Okay. Yeah, and August makes a good point there. I suppose if we're trying to connect with somebody for an appeal, we can do our best to make sure transportation is available for them. Okay, I think I'm headed towards the comments now. So there was one comment about, in each of the suspension and the warning forms, we do have a section for the person's name or something that we would refer to the person as. And there's a question, well, what if someone doesn't want to provide that? At this time, I'm not sure a way around that. We do need to identify somebody in some way. So the comment I added here was that, we may still provide that warning and suspension without the name field filled in. I mean, we'll have to track it in our own system through, someone we identified on video. I do think practically in some of the folks that we have the most challenges with right now, they're very well known to the drivers on these certain routes. I think generally our drivers have a rapport with passengers to know them in some capacity. So I punted on that a little bit, but left it by saying, I don't know how else we get around that. We'll just have to address it as we come across it. Follow-up will be very challenging if no one provides a name, we can't identify them in any way, what will be a challenge. And then the last, and we can go back to any of these issues, but the last one I have here, there was a question about First Amendment rights, and one of the bullet points in our warning and suspension says loud or intrusive use of profanity/obscenities on the bus or in facilities. So we're going to go down the path of talking with legal. We did look at the decorum language that exists for city commission meetings, and I put that language in here. And it really does, point towards disruption of the proceedings being the point where we can ask someone to leave that sort of space. So as we look back at our form, the reasons we'd ask for suspensions, there were already a couple of bullets. I identified the second and the fourth bullet, which in our mind are sufficient to allow us to just remove the bullet related to profanity and obscenities to avoid any First Amendment concerns. The second and fourth bullets are disorderly conduct, including threatening or harassing behavior to other passengers and or drivers. So whether or not someone's cursing, if someone's speaking in a harassing way to other passengers or drivers, which may or may not include cursing, that would be grounds for a warning and then a suspension. And then the fourth bullet is inappropriate or distracting conversation with the driver. So I think we could imagine that scenario as well, with or without obscenities, if someone is engaging the driver too frequently or too loudly, or with or without obscenities, that would be an impeding the service we're trying to provide in both those cases. So after, thinking about what you all shared and then looking back at the form, our recommendation would be just be to get rid of the bullet related to profanity and obscenities, to kind of remove that First Amendment concern and lean back on the two bullets that we think really address the service we're trying to provide and how people might be speaking to other passengers or the drivers. And that is the set of changes we made. Happy to talk through any of those or go back to any of the earlier changes.
Yeah, so PTAC members, does anyone have any comments, questions, concerns about this policy as it's been amended now? Okay, that's a big low nothing. That sounds like a good thing. Adam, I would guess that you've responded to our concerns pretty adequately from that sense. I'm with you. It's definitely shaky waters in terms of the First Amendment stuff, especially now, like there's bullet 2 about mentions including threatening or harassing behavior to other passengers and or drivers. And there's a recent Supreme Court case about what actually constitutes threatening language. But I think that that kind of stuff covers what we are concerned about in terms of, can the buses still operate and can people who are riding the buses do so in a safe and equitable fashion?
Yeah, and I don't want there to be any illusions that we're about to start warning and suspending a huge group of people. I mean, I do think we deal with this with a relatively small group of folks pretty regularly, and then maybe one-off every now and again. We just don't have a great formal framework to walk through this and do it equitably. So I guess I would also share with this group that next steps from here is we'll need to do some coordination with our service provider team, make sure that staff, the admin staff, and the drivers are comfortable with what it means to go through this process. So, this isn't something where we'll be handing out a bunch of slips of paper tomorrow. We'll probably need to do some additional internal work so that we're prepared for, a new process for a lot of folks.
Will the city commission have to approve this policy before it can formally go into effect?
They won't. This is an operational policy, so this is not something that heads up to the commission.
Okay.
Al Ackland, PTAC member. I had a question about the smoking bullet. No smoking on the bus or in the facilities. That'd be on the facilities also, now that we have property.
Yes, that one, yes would be my simple answer. It remains complicated because the actual land remains University of Endowment land, University of Kansas endowment land. So KU has a no smoking on their property rule. So we're going to, we will do our best to enforce that. And I think it works as I've been talking with other operational staff. They say around the union and different things, it's adhered to pretty well. So I think that's what we hope to see. It'll probably take some management. Margaretta, do you have anything to add?
I was going to add that that's actually a state of Kansas law for state property, not just a KU policy. And I think that for diehard smokers, it was a hard transition, but people are pretty used to it at this point.
So
We're trying to evaluate places we would guide people rather, sometimes it's easier to say you can't do it here, but you can do it over there, rather than just say no. That it's a little tricky on that site. People really they would have to go all the way out to the public sidewalk. So there's not necessarily like a convenient near your bus sort of place or near the building sort of place that's acceptable. You have to go pretty far away to get to a
So
spot.
what's the halo around like just regular bus stops then? Do those count as facilities? Like if you're, say, inside a shelter or on a bench or standing right next to a pedestal that says this is a bus stop for something that's otherwise unimproved, would those count as facilities for this?
They do. We identify bus stops as facilities. I don't know that we haven't got as specific as a certain radius or diameter or anything like that. I think we, with 400 bus stops, our ability to oversee that is going to be a complaint
Limited
based.
at best.
And so I suppose I would hope if there's regular occurrences at a specific bus stop that we're getting complaints about, we'd be able to address that with the person. But I don't know that we'll even have the capacity to do it on a,
Yeah.
one-off complaint about somebody smoking is probably just going to have to be let go.
Okay. Good comment and question, Alan. Anybody else from PTAC have anything they want to ask about regarding this draft policy? Okay, let's go ahead and move on then. So next item on the agenda, that was our only regular agenda item. So next is if there's any items that PTAC members want to discuss on their own today or to add to the agenda for future meetings or work sessions. As always, if you don't want to bring it up during a meeting, you can email Adam, Lance, and myself with topics of interest to you, and we will definitely take that under advisement when we craft the agenda for future meetings. So does any member of PTAC have anything that they want to talk about that isn't otherwise covered in an agenda item today? Okay, that sounds like a big bull nothing. So let's go ahead and continue on to transit staff items. Adam, I believe you have a couple of things you want to talk about with us, or at least advise us about.
Yeah, I do. So Central Station update is a deceptively short bullet for what I have to share about that item, but you may have seen our press release with some challenges with keeping on timeline with construction. We needed to move the opening of that facility back until after the new year. We were pushing hard for this fall, and it just wasn't going to happen. So the current timeline for that, there should be some paving going in the next couple of weeks that will make it look all of a sudden like it's very close out there on site. The reality is the site itself, we're probably looking at around mid-September when all the outdoor stuff should start looking pretty complete. The building itself and everything inside there is more like mid-November. So probably between, right before the holidays or between the two major holidays is probably when the building itself will get in place. So that has impacts on a number of different ancillary projects. I hesitate to even call them ancillary projects because they're their own big things, but the obvious one would be route redesign that is dependent on that facility to be available for bus transfers. So on the city side, routes will remain as they are today until the end of the year, and then we'll transition to the new route structure when Central Station opens after the new year. That's how we're going to have to approach that piece of it. Lance asked in the lead up to this meeting about ride guides. So we're working with the university on a limited run of reprint, if you will, of ride guides. There are some relatively minor changes to KU routes, just schedules, I think, for the most part, in August. So we will do a reprint that'll get us through the end of the year. But the large deployment of ride guides will happen leading up to the new year. So, Margareta, do you want to say anything else about that piece?
Well, I was just gonna say I have the proof on my desk today and we're just, KU routes are going to be adjusted to end 30 minutes earlier. So we made adjustments to which timing we were using for the evening hours so that we would get right up to 10 o'clock. And we're going to be starting Safe Ride 30 minutes earlier so that we'll still have no break in service. We just have minimal ridership on buses after 10 o'clock. And so we're going to move those hours to Safe Ride. So that's really where we're at. I'm not sure what the time will be for us getting these, but we've made some notes on it, little yellow things so that it's got the same cover and then it's just being extended through the fall, and updating a service calendar to just cover through December. So that's what our plan is.
Thank you for that. So a couple of other things. When it comes to microtransit service, we have made it through the procurement process of that. So we have, there was a consent agenda item back on June 20th. We selected Spare Labs as our vendor to provide microtransit service. So the university already uses Spare for Safe Ride. The city will begin using Spare in a new way for Sunday service, but also it will provide better technology for Nightline so that people can request trips via an app on demand rather than having to call ahead during business hours. So some nuance of that is I would imagine in maybe 60 to 90 days, we'll have the availability to roll out that technology. We will be able to implement that overnights for what's currently Nightline. That doesn't add cost to the system, but we can't roll out Sunday service until the routes change. The hours we're using for Sunday service come from lower demand times on existing fixed routes. So that's one piece of the puzzle that also just gets delayed because of the central station delay in opening. So that's something we'll communicate about it. It will provide the opportunity to roll out Spare, with an existing service and get our feet under us for that new technology instead of everything at once. So there's some silver lining to that, but I know the public's eager for some Sunday availability, and unfortunately, we're just going to have to move that as well to line up with our resources that are available. We continue to move forward on real-time information, what's called GTFS real-time. It's a feed that allows people on apps to see buses real-time. It will provide information to our next arrival and departure bus signage at Central Station. So that project will continue to move through, and probably sometime this late fall, early winter, we should get to the availability of having a trip planning app that does have real-time information in it, which is different than our current setup with double map. So we're trying to look ahead at this fall as, pushing forward as many new resources as we can that aren't directly tied to Central Station, but knowing that some of them just are directly tied to Central Station. So that's where we're at on a few of those things. Before I talk about the next bullet item, anything I forgot or other gaps that you have questions about related to Central Station? Okay. Well, please, as you think of them, email us. We'll try to keep you all in the community updated, keep putting out our project updates on our social media with photos and what some of the next steps are. Like I said, you should see some pretty significant paving. I don't think they'll get to it this week, but I think next week there will be a lot of that area getting paved out there. So excited to see that milestone.
Did think of one question that you probably don't have a detailed answer to now. That's absolutely fine. What is this delay doing in terms of budgetary impact
So I don't know that I could quickly think of a negative budgetary impact. We'll certainly pick up some new operational costs once the facility opens. You know, janitorial and new electricity and different things that we don't have today. But I don't know that I can identify, you know, the service, like I mentioned with Sunday being kind of a swap of hours. We don't add or remove service hours. So
I think I was thinking more of like the project itself, like the construction. Are we on budget with what we're doing right now, or is adding the extra months of time that we're going to be working on the station going to change that perspective or picture?
it'll likely add some, you know, we've already had some small change orders come through. It's been within what's called contingency. So any project has some additional percentage built into the budget that would allow for unexpected things. So, you know, we've had to face some of those things that we just didn't expect certain costs, and have had to add them in, whether it be materials or additional time working on different pieces of the project. So I do expect we'll see some more of that, because we'll have contractors out there longer than they expected to be out there. But I have not gotten the alarm bells from the project team yet that will be, you know, an outside of the budget sort of change order. So we'll see more specifics come through when we get closer to that point. They you know, timeline wise, they are. We have the majority of the contracting team on site through the end of September, because that's when we expected the building to be wrapped up. So, you know, the additional timeline added to the site, for example, doesn't add to our general contracting costs, because they were going to be there anyways working on the building. But it may add some subcontractor costs, those folks who are out there. So good question. You know, I'll keep this group updated, of course, but some of those small change orders just come through city commission consent.
Yeah, I mean, like $10,000 or something is something you need to do a change order for, but in the grand scheme of things, when we're already spending about $10 million on it, it's a drop in the bucket. So I'm glad that we're still within what the contingency planning budget was for it, at least.
Yeah. Good question, though. All right, I will do a little bit of screen sharing on this next item. Just wanted to highlight a couple of amenity related things. So I know everyone is quite in love with what's going on 23rd Street right now. I'm sure you'll be more in love with it when it's done. But as part of that work, we are integrating shelters and bus stops all throughout that corridor. And you may have seen this picture online, but we have our newer shelters do have integrated solar lighting. So these aren't hardwired. They've got solar panels on top of them that aren't viewable in this photo, but this is a good photo of the cutout that we have at 23rd and Harper. But every shelter along this stretch that's the newer style of shelter will have integrated solar lighting. So, you know, we'll keep adapting and trying to be responsive to what people want for comfort at their bus stops. But I do think integrated solar is a pretty common feature across bus shelters. And I would expect we'll keep integrating that particular feature as we move forward. But if you haven't seen that out at night before, then go check that out on 23rd Street. The other item I wanted to mention is we have just completed recently a number of new shelters that have Indigenous artwork applied via vinyl wraps of glass bus shelters, which we're very excited and proud about. There's a news release that went out, and this story's on our website. There is a link, all the artist names. There's a link to a deeper dive where each artist has a statement about their piece of artwork. We will be doing a ribbon cutting at one of these sites on Haskell's campus this upcoming Sunday. And so I put in our agenda to save the date for this Sunday from 1 to 3. But there will be a formal release coming out, I believe, this Thursday for community-wide to invite anybody who wants to join to come over. I think we'll be saying a few words and having some some light refreshments at Sacred Ground on right next to Haskell's campus is a building, a kind of a event space in Lutheran Ministries building that they use over there. And then it's a short walk over to one of the shelters that we'll be proud to show off and take some photos and do a ribbon cutting. So PTAC members certainly invited, and I think we'll have a pretty good crowd. It should be a fun experience. This has been, I haven't been as directly involved in this project. Felice has mostly been the lead on this work, but I know it's been real exciting and satisfying for all these artists and fun to see things go out all over town. I think with transit, we have a unique opportunity with 400 bus stops to impart things like artwork kind of throughout neighborhoods. We've got little pockets of capital property all over the place, and that can facilitate something pretty fun and interesting like this. So take a look through these, and if you see them around town, stop and take a closer look, because they're all very amazing pieces of art.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's really cool. Do you know which bus stop they're going to use for the actual ribbon cutting? I'm guessing number 63 was my guess, at least.
Yeah, it's either 63 or 62. It's one, right? Yeah, I can't remember which one.
Oh, they're really close to each other. Okay.
Yeah, but one of those two is the one with the shelter. It's the one kind of on the arch side of the road, if you will, the Haskell Arch. Yeah, it should be a nice space to look at.
Good. Okay. Anyone have any comments, questions, concerns about that? I hope no concerns. Okay. Well, that is everything that we have on our agenda for today. The next scheduled meeting for PTAC will be August 14th. That's the second Monday of August. I don't know why it wasn't in the agenda for today, but August 14th is the next second Monday, which we will be meeting at. Same planned time as always. Until then, hope you have a great rest of your day and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.